Command & Conquer Red Alert 3, developed and released by Electronic Arts in 2008 for PC, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Third and final release within the Red Alert franchise, achieved an 82 on Metacritic across the game's lifespan. As we near the 15th year anniversary, let's take a look back at the development and understand how EA approached the development process, and see how this real-time strategy game evolved into what would become Command & Conquer Red Alert 3. Started by Westwood Studios in 1995, Command & Conquer, later known as Command & Conquer Tiberian Dawn, was a huge success. With very few games in the RTS genre featuring actors and CGI cutscenes telling the story, made the Command & Conquer franchise stand out against its competitors. In 1998, Westwood Studios was purchased by Electronic Arts and fully merged with EA's Los Angeles studios in 2003. Between 2003 and 2010, the games released for the franchise were developed by an internal RTS team at EA Los Angeles, still featuring many of the original creators and developers behind the franchise's most popular titles. The franchise grew and expanded to 9 mainline games across 3 different series, each featuring 1 expansion since their initial release as of 2023. The 3 main series are Tiberium, Generals, and Red Alert. Tiberium focuses on a meteor that crashes into the Earth carrying an unknown material, later named Tiberium, and focuses on the impacts of humans and the Earth. Generals focuses on 2 global superpowers fighting together against a united enemy, a global liberation army. Finally, the Red Alert series focuses on time travel and real-world alliances, being the Allies and Soviets fighting for global domination. The story of Red Alert 3 starts with the Soviets going back in time to change the outcome of the current war in their favour. Unfortunately, after they shake hands with Albert Einstein, resulting in him exploding into dust, they alter the space-time continuum. This allows a new threat to rise, the Empire of the Rising Sun, the Japanese. Due to altering the past, nuclear weapons no longer exist, putting the Soviets in a worse position than before with 2 powerful enemies at their doorstep. Unfortunately, due to Red Alert 3 being developed in the early 2000s, information on the development is scarce. A few members of the development team have been interviewed, and some interviews remain online. However, as there is a lack of information publicly, some information may be inaccurate and may result in speculation. The RTS team at EA LA was working on Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, which was to be released globally on the 6th of December 2004. Mark Skaggs, an executive producer at the time, sent a message to the Command & Conquer communities on the 8th of December 2004 stating, "We are very proud to announce that the team that brought you Command & Conquer Red Alert 2, Command & Conquer Yuri's Revenge, and Command & Conquer Generals has officially started work on our next project set in the Red Alert universe." Concluding his email with, "Look for an official announcement soon," this would not occur for a few years. Mark himself and external reports indicated that the Red Alert game was only given 9 months of development time, from its concepts to release. After taking a break and being convinced to stay by EA, Mark decided to leave and pursue other opportunities. Concept art was supposedly shown in 2005, however nothing has publicly surfaced online, resulting in the belief that Red Alert had been put on hold or cancelled by EA. In an interview by game developer in 2008, senior executive producer Amar Maggi stated that a small group of the RTS team initially did a little bit of pre-production on Red Alert 3 back in late 2004, early 2005. Backing up what Mark announced in 2004 with a small team starting development, however it is unclear how far the development team got before they were officially greenlit by EA. Greenlit means approval for full production and development, while still with concept stages and early prototypes, but knowing the game will receive the appropriate funding and release. Art director Matthew Britton said, "Command & Conquer 3 Tiberian Wars was released in March of 2007. I imagine that Red Alert 3 was greenlit 6 months before that, which falls into October 2006. While no official greenlit date or period has been released, it is hard to officially determine when it was given approval by EA." In the same interview with game developer, Amar stated that we officially started work on Red Alert 3 about 18 months ago, about March or April of 2007. Matthew and lead engineer Austin Ellis both state that development started once Tiberian Wars was released. By this information, we can place full development starting between March and April 2007, with the game being greenlit around October 2006. With most modern game titles, the development time can vary. Most studios give teams on average between 3 to 5 years for development before release. However, EA only gave the team between 12 to 18 months to develop the full game. While some assets were reused from Tiberian Wars, it was a tight schedule for the team. Austin says that EA never really understood the RTS genre. Unfortunately, we were disappointed to find out our development cycle was again going to be tight. I'm not 100% sure of the dates, but from start to code was about a year. Amar stated previously that the development started 18 months ago, conflicting, but we know they had a year in development that was heavily impacted by the decisions of EA's upper management. With all development processes, you go through quality assurance, or QA for short, making sure everything is working correctly by forcibly breaking the game in unique ways to confirm actions are occurring correctly. Austin mentions that our QA team was forced to be in a different part of the office, sometimes even in a different building. However, we had a small group of tech QA embedded during the development of Command & Conquer 3, Tiberian Wars, which worked very well, funny that. So we continued the same format for Red Alert 3 also. Indeed, increasing the size of the embedded team, which of course was very beneficial, as we could lean over the desk partitions and ask them direct questions rather than resubmitting a request to the QA ticket system. As a result, this improved the QA response time and allowed for bugs to be resolved more quickly. With the separation of the QA team outside the regular office, it seemed like EA was forcing restrictions onto the development team to create the title quickly instead of trying to make a functional game. However, the team still achieved many goals throughout the development, even though EA wanted to solely focus on profits and wanted to make a title quickly. With the transition to 3D graphics, sprites and 2D graphics became less frequent within modern titles due to the increase and more powerful hardware being able to render objects in a 3D environment. Westwood created their own engine originally based on a modified version of the Sur Renderer 3D engine, which they would label as W3D, meaning Westwood 3D. This engine would evolve into the Sage engine, meaning Strategic Action Game Engine. This would be used between 2003 and 2010, with modifications occurring throughout to improve the engine across the games released during that period. Austin said that when they were developing the game for Red Alert 3, the team was able to leverage a lot of existing technology developed for Tiberian Wars into Red Alert 3. As Tiberian Wars was a modern RTS, with more commonly known features and a similar gameplay style with tanks and jets, allowing for easy transition and features to be used across titles. Compared to Lord of the Rings, featuring ogres and bows, they were unable to use a lot of the characteristics. Austin said that we wanted to improve the Sage engine for Red Alert 3, firstly because it was looking dated compared to our competition, and secondly it was becoming more difficult to manage and maintain after going through so many iterations and games. This engine was used in probably 20 titles. Due to the short development time for the game, only between a year and 18 months, the management team gave Austin and the other engineers the addition of 3 large enhancements to implement so they could still hit the release date, primarily being selected by the senior engineers. Austin said that first choice we decided on was upgrading the renderer, for which we ported over existing EA tech, including much improved lighting, normal mapping, speed, etc., and had a better render pipeline so things like beautiful water were possible. And this is present when comparing Tiberian Wars to Red Alert 3. Yes, the art styles are different, but the water looks more natural and the buildings and light reflections appear more realistic. The second was a refactor, meaning to clean and improve the readability and allow for easier debugging of the unit AI. The third, which Austin doesn't quite remember correctly, but mentions it may have been network improvements, introducing a live service packet management layer, or reintroducing naval units. Different members of the development team pushed for different upgrades. Austin said that the graphics programmer was naturally pushing for the renderer to be upgraded, while he was pushing for the AI refactor. As Austin said that, my reason for the AI was clear: easier to debug, easier to add new functionality and iterate, giving us a better foundation for games going forwards. With every unit having an alternate mode or ability, Austin said that it increased the interaction matrix by a lot, so they had to confirm and implement groundwork to behave efficiently and solid when there are hundreds of units across the map. These upgrades and implementations into the engine allowed the team to improve the overall quality of the engine in a short period of time. The engine will be dubbed Sage 2.0, however only dubbed by the community as no member of the development team has publicly stated it being a second iteration.
With the introduction of Japan, branded Empire the Rising Sun, the team had many ideas. Chris Corey, an executive producer, first announced on the 14th of February 2008 that a third faction was part of the game.
I can tell you that the game will feature Soviets, allies, and a third faction that's unlike anything you've ever seen before.
However, Austin says that the decision for a third faction was decided relatively late, with several team members putting forward their requests, eventually choosing Japan, later branded Empire the Rising Sun.
While no timeframe is given, we can assume that it was decided early within the concept or production stages, as Amos stated with game developer that Japan was a huge part of World War II. It felt logical as well to include them into the game and use that as a vehicle that we could drive a lot of our experimental gameplay, such as transforming units. It's stuff we wanted to do in the game, but we didn't really want to affect the Soviets and Allies too much. Those two are two factions where the fans of the series would have felt disillusioned if we transformed them too much. Starting with concept stages, art is meant to represent the style in the game to producers and companies before getting approved for production. As previously mentioned, some concept art was supposedly shown in 2005, however nothing has surfaced nor has this been confirmed. Inspiration from pop culture or other releases is common within gaming, and for their own franchise it's more common as most units and styles are continued throughout similar titles.
Art Director Matthew says, I also remember that as we were looking at combat vehicles from previous Red Alert games, Leon Gurr, one of our modelers, brought a lesser known line of important model kits called Mashkin Krieger to my attention. The Mashkin Krieger kits were very similar in many ways to the look of the previous Red Alert games, and we definitely took inspiration from some of what they had done.
An example of a Mashkin Krieger kit is shown here. It's plastic parts that you put together and then you paint whatever you like, allowing for creativity and uniqueness for individual units. Each country has a different name for the set, but they frequently are soldiers or vehicles. Matthew continued with, I remember we had a particularly strong concept art team right from the start. Guys like Darren Bacon, Raju Howell, Greg Luzanak and TJ Frame came out of the gate with guns blazing from day one. As Matthew states, they've all done terrific work across movies, gaming and elsewhere. Matthew kindly provided some concept art of each faction, showcasing their designs and setting within the Red Alert universe. The Allies focuses on a blue colour scheme with more modern reference, with slick and black body parts. The Soviets have a variety of concepts, featuring the communist colours red and yellow, as well as the prominent hammer and sickle throughout. From the concept art and in-game, you can see the individual pieces of metal holding together the units or buildings, showcasing the cheapness or rushing of construction to meet the demand. Finally, the Empire's concepts showcase a futuristic design and style. The designs incorporate solar panels, showcasing the movability of the units and structures, while also the influence of technology. Even though the designs are early concepts, since the Empire is a new faction, the art department made it more distinctive from the Allies and Soviets. The UI of the game is important, as it is how the player will interact with the units and buildings. For an RTS, it is one of the most important game designs. Matthew says the look of the game's UI was based on old Russian propaganda posters. Researching that was really interesting and fun, and looking at the menus, the UI incorporates the common Soviet colours red and yellow throughout, with the star present, caution lines, and slight corner curves representing a paper being folded over. The in-game interface showcases more copper textures, caution tape, and creates more of an industrial feel. From these design decisions, we're able to see how the inspiration was taken to achieve this look. Austin says that the art direction was quite unusual, especially for a Command & Conquer game, and it had somewhat of a toy box appeal. I even remember raising my eyebrows when the first set of models were delivered to be added to the game, but looking back on it now, it was a genius decision. A screenshot of Red Alert 3 is immediately recognisable, and this is still relevant to this day. as screenshots, gameplay, or official materials are easier to recognise compared to previous Red Alert games, with Red Alert being much brighter and more realistic than other third-generation Command & Conquer games.
Not a lot is known about how the sound team went around recording the sounds and effects for the various units and environments, similar to how the music team created pieces for the campaigns and skirmish battles. It is believed that due to the upgrades to the stage engine, the team was able to utilise dynamic environmental music, meaning the tracks would play at certain sequences or based on certain actions occurring throughout the gameplay. Legendary Command & Conquer composer Frank Kopelke returned to compose 3 tracks for Red Alert 3, The Red Menace, Grinder 2, and the more commonly known Hell March 3.
Majority of the units from Red Alert 2 either evolved or were kept very similar when added into Red Alert 3. Some units from previous titles were either removed or altered to a campaign-only unit. Austin said that a unit that got cut was the Tesla tank, which was a community and team favourite. In fact, our lead designer got a lot of flack for that decision, but they stuck with it. It did finally make it into the series, but as a single-player campaign unit only. Even though Red Alert 3 builds off of the previous title and features similar units, the team still designed unit documents. These provide the team with details about the statistics and information about the unit, such as type of attacks, health, and other important gameplay information. Austin shared 2 pictures featuring the unit documents for the Soviets and Empires, which only show the Warbear and Recon drone respectively. He also stated that they are just the front pages of the unit design documents for the 2 factions, which were handed to me by the lead designer. You can just make out the thickness of the document, as these documents included every type of unit for that said faction. This allowed the team to understand each individual's unit statistics and functionality, making it easier for implementation. Not a lot is known about the development of the multiplayer, known as skirmish, and campaign maps. An unknown designer of the development team told Austin that one campaign mission was about 2 weeks to get everything functional, then 2 to 3 months depending on the complexity. While this does not provide a clear date or time, we were able to determine that with the 27 campaign missions, 9 for each faction, it took 54 weeks for everything to get functional, which is a lot of development time just for maps. Sequences are part of a mission such as the Allies coming to help the Soviets would be longer, so common parts such as actions, timers, holdouts can be reused once developed, so some maps will be shorter development time than others. For multiplayer or skirmish maps, nothing is known about their development and how long they took to make. We can estimate, going by the 2 weeks, even though that was 4 campaign missions, that for the 30 skirmish maps, it took them 60 weeks of development time. Multiplayer maps are easier to develop, as they are reused in the assets from the campaign missions, such as like the backgrounds, the building, terrain, and so forth, and don't require any direct scripted events. There are a few videos on behind the scenes making of the cinematics, one of which was available in the premiere edition of the game. This explores the designing of sets, costumes, alterations to sets, such as indoor and outdoor moments, and other details. They state within the bonus video that they had 11 sets in total, and other than that, not a lot is known about the direct specifications. Green screen was used for video calls and special effects, such as the attack on the premiere. However, it is still unclear how they managed to sign big Hollywood actors like Tim Curry and George Takei. Matthew says that our cinematics team leaned fully into the campaigness of the previous Red Alert games and took it even further. Those productions were really fun to put together. which throughout the bonus video, Matthew is present within it. And he also stated that he enjoyed either designing or being involved throughout the process of the cinematics and really enjoyed that part of the job a great deal. With most games, there is unused content left within the game's files and code. However, for Red Alert 3, there is very little known content left in. A video by XYHC released in April 2020 showcases a few of the campaign-only items, such as the President's Car, the Survey and Radar Ship, to name a few. There are a few crates that randomly appear to duplicate or kill units, probably used for quick testing purposes, maybe for a sequence within a campaign mission, such as the Commando Must Live. There is another crate with a blue house looking icon, which when walked into does nothing, and this is the only content that is currently known as of 2023. Austin says that after Japan was chosen later to be rebranded as the Empire of the Rising Sun, a close second was an alternative Iran or Persia, with a few other more unlikely candidates, including an Atlantis-based army of fishmen and a robot faction. Having a robot faction most likely evolved into Japan due to having many references to transformations and robotic units. Iran or Persia would have fit the theme for Red Alert. However, I believe that they wanted to create something new and take inspiration from pop culture, which would have been hard to achieve with Iran. An army of fishmen from Atlantis would have been different, cool idea, but probably wouldn't have fit the Red Alert theme either. They probably strayed away from this one as they probably didn't want to make another mutant or alien faction after Tiberian Wars. Matthew says that one of the more robotic Soviet units, Tesla Trooper if I remember correctly, should be piloted by a trained monkey. The art department did some concept art for it, but we never got the idea approved. It seemed that with the parachuting bear, aka the bearer chute, our producers felt that one animal gag was enough. With animal influence for each faction, dolphins and dogs for the Allies, bears for the Soviets and dragonflies for the Empire, it would have made sense with the animals currently used. Concept art of this unit has not publicly surfaced, unfortunately for all those robot monkey fans. Austin mentions that one major feature that was eventually cut was the idea of a Red Alert button, which was a literal massive button on the HUD which you slam at some point during the match, which would do something. We loved the notion of this Red Alert button. The visceral nature of the physical button tap was great, and the fact it sent the match into Red Alert sounded very cool, reinforcing the very title of the game. But we could never figure out what the button would actually do, so regretfully the idea was scrapped. And this button fits the theme really well. However, understandable that they weren't able to come up with an action for it. The team would need to decide if it was different for each faction, and decide if it was going to be campaign only and also working multiplayer. We don't know if this button transitioned into special powers or not, and again, no public information has surfaced on this either. Throughout any development process, there'll be some interesting facts or stories that aren't covered publicly about the game or are forgotten. Austin mentions that something we did in the final months of development was conduct a week-long convention where RTS players from around the world, literally all the non-IC continents, were invited to take part in a pre-alpha review and playtest the game. This was a lot of fun and we got tremendously useful feedback from the guys. The week ended with a knockout tournament where all the invitees play one another. The final took place in the main theatre at EA office, broadcast on the big screen. The winner's prize would be their online tag, would be used as a unit name. The ultimate winner went by the name of Apollo, which is why the Allied aerial fighter goes by that ID. Cool and unique story for everyone involved, but this was not mentioned or appeared anywhere online throughout press or stories, which is weird for naming a unit after a player. EA might have tried to keep this a secret at the time, however it is unclear why. After almost 4 years since the original announcement by Mark, EA officially announced Red Alert 3 on the 14th of February 2008 through their YouTube channel with executive producer Chris Corey, also discussing some details about the game.
Earlier today, the world was stunned as Electronic Arts Los Angeles declared today Red Thursday by announcing one of the most anticipated RTS games, Command & Conquer Red Alert 3. For more information about this colossal announcement, we're joined by Red Alert 3 executive producer Chris Corey via satellite. Hey, Chris.
Hi, David. Bringing back Red Alert was something we always wanted to do, and we've actually been working on designs for this game for the past several years.
Following the announcement video, a post was made on the official Command & Conquer site discussing that a beta was going to run for those who purchased the Kane's Wrath expansion for Tiberian Wars. Focusing on online multiplayer, the beta only allowed skirmish battles, showcasing the online functionality. With all betas for games, it was to showcase the new engine upgrades, new units, and remove any critical bugs before the official release.
The beta started on the 24th of July and ran until 29th of September, with more keys given throughout the beta.
Various materials and information were released to the press and public leading up to the release. These range from cast reveal videos, developer interviews, gameplay footage, and trailers. Game companies do press releases to build up anticipation and awareness of the title. Austin mentions, "A crazy thing we did was a press review in a literal nuclear bunker under the streets of Moscow, all decked out in vintage Soviet flags and paraphernalia, right when a Victory Day military parade was being conducted 100 meters away in Red Square. Blew the reporter's mind. However, there is no footage or reference of this happening. A crazy idea, and if it was confirmed to occur, it would have been a very interesting and one-of-a-kind press release." As the team suffered short development time, Austin said that one of the reasons for the short development time was that EA executives that decided on the launch date were apprehensive of competing against the upcoming StarCraft 2, which on reflection is pretty silly as they ended up launching several years later, as Blizzard delayed the release of StarCraft 2 until 2010, almost 18 months after Red Alert 3's scheduled release. Everything was building up to the release date, and on the 28th of October 2008, the team at EA LA just released the third installment within the Red Alert franchise. The reviews from the community and press started to come in. IGN, GameSpot, and Eurogamer all reviewed Red Alert 3 as an 8 out of 10, noting the silliness of the game, but willing to stay true to the format of an RTS. All these reviews came together to have an 82 on Metacritic. However, the players did not all have the same perception as the press. Austin said that the reception was worse than we hoped, as players had mixed reception. It seemed like they either loved it or hated it, and those who hated it were often the more vocal of the two. Either players got what we were going for, or they just had the reaction, "What is this?" However, a big complaint of players at the time was the games looked childish and not serious enough. Not what we were expecting for a Command & Conquer game. This wasn't reflected in the gameplay at all, however, first impressions last. This was further emphasized by Supreme Commander, another RTS game that released in 2007 that received a critical acclaim and high community reception. Austin mentions that this led to multiple comparisons between Red Alert 3 and Supreme Commander, even though the team thought the games played out differently. Similarly, many players didn't like the design style as they didn't understand the direction the team had taken or were drawing comparisons to other previous Command & Conquer titles. Despite this, Matthews said the team was definitely proud of the release and scores received, stating, "Getting one such score is tough enough, but doing it over and over, game after game, is quite an accomplishment, which is something very few games or teams accomplish." After 2 years of development and some late nights, the team finally had a chance to celebrate. They released Red Alert 3, even though it had mixed feedback and results. Everyone involved, either in art, cinematics, engineering or other departments, loved what they work on and are continually proud of the game. 6 months after the release of Red Alert 3, an expansion titled Uprising was released for PC only, focusing on Yuriko, the Japanese commander, expanding the lore and story behind the Empire of the Rising Sun. There are also 3 additional missions for each of the factions, featuring new and returning actors, the notable one being David Hasselhoff. These missions followed the events after each of their respective campaign finales in the base game, with either complete new units or alternate versions due to a time skip occurring naturally between the games. Other than 2 public videos on EA's official YouTube channel talking about the cast and a small part of development, there is a lack of information from interviews or public knowledge about the development. Going again from 2 weeks, we can understand that the campaign took 26 weeks to develop. Some assets were reused, however most of the campaign features new locations and units, resulting in a longer development time. Austin shared a picture of the design and outline document for the Uprising content, focusing on the Yuriko campaign. We can tell from what was described, such as her transition between her walking animations throughout the campaign is present, and in a similar way to how she gains her powers across the missions. As there is a lack of information about the expansion, due to either not being shared or surfaced online, the development of the expansion remains partly a mystery. However, we do know that the additional content took 6 months to develop, and most likely started after the base game's release. We are able to determine that the expansion was most likely developed by a smaller RTS team at EA LA, as Amar stated with game developer, "We primarily have one main RTS team, and then splinter off small groups of that to fulfill whatever needs the company asks of us, such as expansions." After the mediocre success of Red Alert 3, EA requested another game within the Command & Conquer franchise. This led to the release of Command & Conquer 4 Tiberian Twilight, which would be the last mainline game within the franchise due to the low community reception and removal of many staples the franchise was known for. After the release of Red Alert 3, many of the developers and known faces for the RTS genre left EA to pursue other opportunities. More team members left after the low-performing release of Command & Conquer 4. In the end, the RTS team was shut down by EA as they no longer saw profit within the franchise. As Matthew says, many of us continued working together for years at various studios after the team was shut down by Electronic Arts. EA tried to keep the franchise alive with smaller releases, trying to earn some quick money. They released Command & Conquer Tiberian Alliances, a browser MMO game, and Command & Conquer Rivals, a mobile RTS with very little similarity to the original franchise. For the fans and community of Command & Conquer, the only content for the games are mods created by the community. As EA stopped supporting the games and the franchise, the modding community arose to fill the void of games, adding new units, expansions, and even full campaigns. In 2018, it was announced that the first Command & Conquer and Red Alert games would be getting remastered, built from the ground up and upscaled to use the most of modern hardware. The remasters were released in June 2020 and saw hope for the community, as they were praised for being the same games as the original and handled by the original team, even though they were no longer working at EA together. There was hope within the community that it would mean the second generation of Command & Conquer games within the franchise would get remastered. However, EA has not said anything about the franchise since they released the two remasters in 2020. The people who developed Red Alert 3 loved the finished product. I'm still really proud of it artistically, Matthew states. And Austin said that the units and maps were well designed, it looked pretty good and it had a banging soundtrack. Even though it may not have been received well compared to other titles, short development time, uncertainty in the early days of production, EA wanting to earn quick money, or the community didn't understand the direction chosen, the team loved the finished product, and knowing that the development team are happy with the final game is reassuring. So, as we continue to battle for our comrades, the Empire, or our allies, Red Alert is cherished by us.